the environmental movement, a period where gains were made in protecting the environment and human life. This movement put into light the dangerous trends of the US that were slowly destroying the planet and rallied citizens of the United States to make positive environmental change. It was the year 1957, and the gypsy moth infestation of the northeastern forests of the United States had stripped trees and demolished forests. It needed to be stopped. Congress granted the U.S. Department of Agriculture $2.5 billion in efforts to eradicate the pesky bug. DDT and oil were sprayed over wide expanses of forests, farms, and gardens. This occurred back before it had been discovered that DDT was an extremely toxic chemical to both humans and wildlife. That eventually led to death for a large portion of birds, fish, and mammals alike.
It begins with the war-born development of DDT. This diabolical weapon of modern science saved millions of humans, but killed billions of insects. Man, with this newly discovered force, has at long last gained the upper hand in our age-old struggle. The really heavy blow fell only a few months ago. It came from laboratories where top scientists from famous universities and from industrial and government organizations collaborated to develop something new and different. They succeeded. They perfected Pestroy, the most effective weapon man has ever wielded against insects.
By the 1960s, the United States was in a crisis. The rivers that were once a source of life were now a hazard. The food that grew from the ground was unsafe to eat, and even the air Americans breathed was toxic. The pollution that the U.S. constantly had been releasing into the environment for centuries was finally a problem that could no longer be ignored. Change arrived in 1962 with the publication of Silent Spring. The novel, written by Rachel Carson, a marine biologist and conservationist, described the devastating effects of the widespread use of lethal chemicals and clearly outlined the urgency to halt these horrendous attacks upon the environment and well-being of Americans. Silent Spring ended up reaching the lives of almost every American. The people's eyes had been opened to the environmental issues, and that's when progress began. The movement first started among college students, and using Silent Spring as their guide, they rallied and protested for environmental protection. Colleges held informative conferences and spread the message of a cleaner and safer future. Groups began to form, including the Environmental Defense Fund, Friends of the Earth, and Greenpeace in the years between 1967 and 1970. These activists were young people determined to make a change in the world and a better future for generations to come. And the fact was, this mindset was not limited to college-aged hippies, but it had found a place in the millions of Americans' hearts. The first Earth Day in 1970 proved this sentiment was true. 20 million Americans hit the streets April 22nd to show their support for environmental causes.
For 2 hours, fashionable Fifth Avenue was off-limits to automobiles and became a crowded pedestrian mall. Autos were banned on busy 14th Street, too, and thousands of persons jammed into Union Square to attend an Earth Day rally. The square hadn't looked this clean in years, with volunteer help doing the sprucing up. It was a fun day for many school-age youngsters participating in their very first demonstration.
Political change began paving way to legislation that would protect Americans from deadly chemicals while also preserving the environment. Kennedy resided as president when Silent Spring was published and faced the public pressure to do something about the toxins mentioned in her book and pollution overall. He laid the groundwork for the EPA by investigating the toxicity of pesticides and started to get the government involved with public health issues regarding pollutants. Following the footsteps of the previous president, Lyndon B. Johnson supported environmental conservation in his Great Society and signed the Wilderness Act. The Nixon presidency followed, which was known for its efforts to protect Americans from the harmful toxins and pollutants that were still being dumped into the ocean, lakes, and rivers. Under Nixon, the Environmental Protection Agency was fully formed and made significant ground with the Clean Air Act, Safe Drinking Water Act, and Endangered Species Act.
Each of us all across this great land has a stake in maintaining and improving environmental quality, clean air and clean water, the wise use of our land, the protection of wildlife and natural beauty, parks for all to enjoy. These are part of the birthright of every American. To guarantee that birthright, we must act, and act decisively. It is literally now or never. During the past 3 years, we have made a good start. We have passed new laws to protect the environment, and we have mobilized the power of public concern. But there is much yet to be done.
Ever since the inception of the environmental movement, there has been continual progress. This progress is sustained today under the current President Obama. He recognizes environmental issues that the U.S. faces today and is making legislative change that will help protect the planet. A major issue today that President Obama addresses is the CO2 emissions and the rise in climate change. He has taken steps to reduce these greenhouse gases by reducing fuel and energy by 20% by 2020. First ever plans for combating climate change are in use, and effective regulatory laws have been set in place to cut emissions, not to mention the ever-rising green technology.
We've got a lot of progress to report. We've made historic investments in the development of clean energy to support hundreds of thousands of jobs, and have doubled the amount of electricity we get from wind and solar energy. We've developed fuel efficiency standards that will nearly double fuel economy for passenger cars by 2025. Cut greenhouse gas emissions from our vehicles by half.
Besides influencing legislation, the environmental movement has affected technology today. Cars, homes, and power sources are all being renovated to be more energy efficient and beneficial for the environment. The mindset of the environmental revolution is still very alive today in the designs for a greener future. Electric cars with zero greenhouse gas emissions are becoming ever popular. New implements for houses can reduce water usage, use recyclable materials, and make use of solar power. In addition to solar power, geothermal, hydropower, and wind energy are also being harnessed to provide for a healthier planet. Technology is one of the major ways that the U.S. is continually moving forward and advancing with preserving the environment. The environmental movement brought awareness about the issues that the United States caused or are affected by. The shift toward protecting the environment has resulted in countless gains that have furthered the well-being of the earth. Thanks to the movement, there is now a sentiment among the American people to protect the health of their environment as well as the health of themselves. The continuous progression of environmentally friendly choices that began in 1962 has led the U.S. to what it is today, a green-minded and environmentally conscious society.